Many of you have asked for a protocol for hyperthyroidism, which is an overactive thyroid. It can become enlarged, such as this one with Graves' disease, but don't worry, I've got 9 natural tips for hyperthyroidism coming right up. You could have some of the symptoms of hyperthyroidism, which include sweating and feeling hot a lot of the time, a rapid heartbeat, weight loss, changes in your appetite as well. You could have irritability issues and sleep disturbances. Your hair can fall out, frequent bowel movements. You could have shakiness in the hands because your nervous system is overactive. Big protruding eyeballs can happen, especially with Graves' disease, and swelling of the actual thyroid gland. So this is something that your doctor is definitely checking for, and you may have had the blood work to confirm that you do have the overactive or hyperthyroid state. Now, some of the causes that you may not have heard about with hyperthyroidism include EMF exposure. So what is that? Electromagnetic fields, and I'm talking about not the natural ones. These are the man-made EMFs. So things like cell phone towers, your cell phone signal, your Wi-Fi in your home. All of these electronics will have a negative impact on your cellular function, especially the way that your thyroid is functioning. Lack of natural sunlight exposure, a lot of blue light toxicity in your environment, again, from artificial lights, and not being grounded all the time. So these are some of the causes that nobody's really talking about as it's related to your thyroid gland, but that's what I like to educate you about. Now let's talk about though, the 9 tips, things that you can do, practical things that you can do on a daily basis to help with your hyperthyroidism. And remember, tip number 9 is going to shock you perhaps. So tip number 1 is to limit your EMF exposure. So whether that's putting your cell phone on airplane mode, trying not to take telephone calls in the car on your cell phone, because basically if it's on Bluetooth, that is irradiating your whole car. It's like turning your car into a microwave oven. So if you think about that, especially if you have children in the car, really important not to take phone calls in the car on your cell phone. Number 2 is to follow Mother Nature's prescription. So what does that mean? That means grounding. So getting outside with your bare feet on the earth, having early morning sunlight exposure, and also sunlight exposure around noontime and in the evening is going to go a long way to actually helping your thyroid, and trying to expose your thyroid to that natural sunlight has a healing effect because of the different rays of sunlight from the sun, and the infrared, the near infrared, and the infrared and the UV as well. Number 3 on the list is to fix your leptin resistance. Now this ties in all of your hormonal balance. Really important to fix that leptin signaling. If you don't know what that is, please check out my other videos on leptin resistance and what to do about it. Tip number 4 for hyperthyroidism is to do full body detox. So getting those toxins out of your body and doing this 3 to 4 times a year is going to go a long way to help with your hyperthyroidism. Tip number 5 is to make sure that your diet includes more seafood. So mineral-rich seafoods, foods that contain, again from the sea, that contain zinc, as well as DHA, so that important omega-3 fatty acid, which is really important for your overall hormonal health, but also the electrical signaling in your body, as well as magnesium and manganese and all of these other minerals, iodine, a big one. And again, this is probably goes against what you've heard about staying away from iodine if you do have a hyperthyroid. You still need a little bit of that iodine in the right amounts, and in food, it's always given it to you in the right amounts, is a really important way to protect that thyroid gland. Tip number 6 is to include some supplements. Now, there are specific ones that have research behind them to actually help to prevent some of the symptoms of hyperthyroidism. And one of them is L-carnitine. It is effective in both reversing and preventing the symptoms of hyperthyroidism, and has a beneficial effect on bone mineralization. And that was a double-blind study. So that was taking 2 to 4 grams of L-carnitine, which is an amino acid. Really important to check that out, as well as magnesium. So magnesium is another supplement that I love for supporting not only the overall body in terms of mineral balance, but specifically for the thyroid and protecting against some of that damage of EMFs in your environment. Magnesium is really important for that. Another mineral is selenium, and in some studies it's shown that it helps, especially if you're medicated for your hyperthyroidism, to support that anti-thyroid effect from the pharmaceuticals. levels. Also vitamin D3, so of course natural sunlight exposure, but studies have shown that a D3 deficiency is related to manifesting hyperthyroidism. And by optimizing vitamin D3 levels, this has a favorable effect on thyroid volume and on the degree of the exophthalmos, or the bulging of the eyes with hyperthyroidism. And zinc. So we know that zinc, again, very supportive for healthy thyroid function. It is another mineral that often is deficient in people who aren't consuming a lot of seafood, but it may also need to be supplemented in a natural form. Tip number 7 for hyperthyroidism is fixing the gut microbiome. So one of the things that you can do in terms of dietary choices to get back to that healthier balance of your good and bad bacteria in the gut is to limit your grain consumption. So I know for those of you who love your carbs, you love your grains, they can be very compromising to your proper digestion, especially things like gluten, unfortunately. And if you do have the Graves component, so the autoimmune component of the hyperthyroidism, the grains, not my favorite food in terms of being able to balance that healthy microbiome. So you may have to limit those at least for a little while. I'm not saying to go off them, but often when you start to fix your hyperthyroidism, you don't necessarily want to go back to having the foods that were aggravating it and your gut microflora in the first place. Tip number 8 is to use some herbal medicines, which have been proven to actually help to slow down that overfunctioning of the thyroid gland. So one of them is lemon balm, and this is known as Melissa officinalis. It's a fantastic herbal medicine to relax the nervous system, but also has been shown to help with hyperthyroidism. And my favorite for hyperthyroidism, the herbal medicine bugleweed. Now this is known as Lycopus europaeus, and in this study, it was found that it helps with stopping that iodine conversion in the thyroid gland. So for an overzealous, a hyperthyroid state, bugleweed also inhibits the conversion of that T4 to the T3 in peripheral tissues as well, and can also inhibit the action of the thyroid stimulating antibodies. So with Graves' disease, that's very important, that autoimmune component. It has been approved by the German Commission E for use in mild hyperthyroidism. So this is something that is definitely used in other parts of the world. I think we're a little bit behind here in treating hyperthyroidism. And of course, whenever you can do something naturally, in my opinion, that's the way to go to help to slow down that overfunctioning of the hyperthyroidism. And tip number 9, the one that you probably maybe didn't think about, is that mind-body connection and what that means in terms of thyroid health. And with thyroid issues, this is known as the 5th energy center of the body, the 5th chakra. It has a lot to do with being able to voice your truth and expressing yourself in a healthy way. Whether you are overexpressing, that can affect the thyroid in a negative way, or not speaking up your truth, that can also affect your thyroid and cause it to be imbalanced. So something to think about in terms of making those connections for your own health so that you can feel better and heal your hyperthyroidism. Now, for more tips on how to minimize that EMF exposure in your life, please check out my video, How to Minimize EMF Radiation Exposure. I'll see you there.